Where did I come from? And where am I going? Hello, welcome to the second episode of Where Did I Come From and Where Am I Going? On this episode, we will spotlight Henry Thomas Saulter, my maternal grandfather. First, a disclaimer. In doing research into family history, at times one may uncover issues that may not have been, before now, widely known. It is not the intention of this project to judge the actions of our ancestors, but to provide the history of our family to the current and future generations, with all of the good as well as all of the spots and blemishes. In learning of our past, we will know better who we are today and where we're going tomorrow. Remember, this project is a work in progress. Please feel free to contact me for additional information you may have to be added to the current work. This is me, Anthony Daniels, along with my siblings, Ernie and Gail Daniels. Our parents are Ernest P. Daniels and Joyce Elva Saulter. Joyce's parents are Hazel Chestnut and Henry T. Saulter. The subject of this episode. Henry Thomas, known as H.T., was born on October 30, 1906 in Lexington, Kentucky, to Ada Belle Davis and Charles Saulter. He was the second of 4 children born to them. His older brother, Charles, was born on March 6, 1905. His sister, Delilah May, was born on December 3, 1907. And his youngest brother, Eugene, was born on April 28, 1917. H.T.'s family had long roots in Lexington, Kentucky, Fayette County. His paternal grandparents were Edward Saulter, born in 1846, and Margaret, maiden name unknown, born in 1849. His maternal grandparents were H. Davis and Laura Mason, born in 1869. His maternal and paternal aunts and uncles are seen on this slide. The year was 1906. President Theodore Roosevelt was in his 5th year of his presidency, 5 years after the assassination of William McKinley. There were 45 states in the Union. The Great San Francisco earthquake occurred on April 18, resulting in over 3,000 deaths. The average life expectancy was 47 years. Heroin, cocaine, and marijuana were available in stores over the counter. Only 6% of Americans graduated high school. Over 95% of births occurred at home. 8% of homes had telephones. And the average wage was 22 cents per hour. The total population of Lexington, Kentucky was just over 35,000 in the 1910 census. A little over 11,000, or 31%, were black. At that time, Lexington, Kentucky had a long history of a large African American presence, inhabiting mainly the neighborhoods of Adamstown, Brucetown, Davis Bottom, Goodloetown, Kinkeadtown, and Prawltown. In December 1909, Charles Saulter and Ada Belle Davis were married in Lexington, Kentucky. The announcement was published in a Lexington newspaper on Christmas Day, 1909. In the announcement, we can see that Saulter was misspelled Satters, Satters. Justice Ben D. Bell was listed as the presiding official of their marriage. I haven't been able to determine if Bell, B-E-L-L, is a misspelling of Bell, B-E-L-L-E. If so, that would raise the possibility of the justice being related to Ada Bell Davis. The announcement was published in the Christmas Day edition 1909 and said that they were married on Friday afternoon at 3:30. This would put their wedding date on December 24. In the 1910 census, H.T.'s parents, Charles and Ada Saulter, were living in the 21st District in Lexington's Ward 3, and they were boarding in the house of Amos and Ellen Scott. At the time the census was taken, Charles was 23 years old and Ada was 25, and they had been married less than a year. Interestingly, they did not have the children with them. Charles was working as a teamster in the coal yard, while Ada was a cook in a private home. Both were able to read and write. Meanwhile, the 1910 census also showed that H.T., at the age of 3, and his two siblings, Charles Jr., age 5, and Delilah May, age 2, were living with their maternal grandmother and step-grandfather, Laura and Thomas Vaughn, both 40 years old. They were living in the 20th District in Ward 2 of Lexington, Kentucky. Laura was a cook for a private family, and Thomas was a laborer on a farm. Laura was able to read and write. Thomas was not. 2 years later, in 1912, the Lexington City Directory listed Charles and Ada as living at 710 North Broadway. At that time, Charles was working as a driver. On the street view on Google Earth, the 1912 home address at 710 North Broadway is now the location of a small business. 4 years later, the 1916 Lexington City Directory showed Charles and Ada residing at 513 Smith Street. Charles is listed as a teamster. We dialed in the address 513 Smith Street on Google Earth, and it appears that a new apartment building is currently at this address. By the time of the 1920 census, the family had been reunited, living in District 52 of Ward 2 in Lexington, Kentucky. H.T. is now 13 years of age, and they had a new sibling since the last census, Eugene, who was 3. Their father, Charles Sr., was listed as a laborer in the streets, and Ada was listed as a laundress working in a private home. A 1927 Lexington City Directory listed Charles and Ada's residence at 744 Florence Avenue in Lexington, Kentucky. The address 744 Florence Avenue was dialed into Google Earth. This is the house currently at the address, and is likely not the original house of the Saulters. Details of H.T.'s early life, unfortunately, have been lost to history. From what we can tell, two important aspects of the Saulter household were religion and education. We don't know when the Seventh-day Adventist message was accepted by the Saulters, but a Seventh-day Adventist directory in 1917, when H.T. was 11 years old, listed Ada Saulter of the Lexington Colored Church contributing to the total sum of $19.16 sent to the Kentucky Conference. To put it in perspective, $19 in 1917 is equal to $502 today. Education was also important, especially to Ada. going back to the 1900 census, Ada Davis, at the age of 13, was living with a friend, Millie Newman, in order to attend school. H.T. Saulter attended Oakwood Junior College in 1923 at the age of 17. Oakwood Junior College, now known as Oakwood University, is the only Seventh-day Adventist HBCU and is located in Huntsville, Alabama. An interesting fact: the grounds of the university were once owned by Peter Blow, a slave owner. One slave that was on the Blow plantation was Dred Scott, who eventually unsuccessfully sued for his freedom. His case went all the way to the Supreme Court in the infamous Dred Scott decision in 1857, which stated that anyone of African American ancestry could not claim citizenship in the United States. Oakwood University first opened in 1896, 31 years after the end of the Civil War, as Oakwood Industrial School. Its stated mission was to provide vocational training and spiritual direction to African Americans in the South. It was renamed Oakwood Manual Training School in 1904. Then, in 1917, it was renamed Oakwood Junior College. In 1943, it was renamed again Oakwood College, and then in 2008, it was renamed Oakwood University. While at Oakwood Junior College, H.T. studied to become a teacher. I don't have any information on this curriculum, but we have empiric evidence that there apparently was an internship as part of the program. That was suggested by this photograph. Written on the back of this photo was H.T. Saulter, Union School, 1925. This was a year before he graduated from Oakwood, so I can only assume that he was a student teacher on assignment. H.T. is standing far left. After 3 years of education, H.T. graduated in 1926 with a teacher's degree. The 1928 yearbook, The Oaks, was apparently the school's first yearbook. It had a few pages honoring alumni, and we find a picture of A.T. while attending school, as well as his name listed among the alumni teachers. This is a photo of the student body of Oakwood Junior College in 1926, the year that H.T. graduated. I have looked through this picture numerous times and I can't decipher if he is even in this picture. Is this H.T.? Or is this H.T.? Or is this H.T.? Or was this the fall semester of 1926, after he had graduated? For the first 2 years after graduation, H.T. worked as a teacher in Jackson, Mississippi and Louisville, Kentucky. In 1928, 2 years after graduation, Frank L. Peterson, the Assistant Secretary of the Education Department of the Southern Union, asked H.T. to go to Nassau, Bahamas to teach at the church school for the 1928 school year. Joseph A. Tucker, the president of Oakwood Junior College, provided the train ticket to Miami, Florida, and the boat fare to Nassau, Bahamas. The Bahamas is a group of over 700 islands. The closest is about 40 miles southeast of Florida. Only 30 of the 700 islands are inhabited. Nassau is the capital city of the Bahamas and the largest city located on the island of New Providence, about 181 miles off the southeast coast of Florida. The population in Nassau in 1928 was over 19,000. The Seventh-day Adventist Church first reached the Bahamas in 1893 through the efforts of colporteur C.H. Richards. The First Adventist Church was formed in 1909 under the leadership of Elder W.A. Swaney, meeting in the Odd Fellows Hall on Meeting Street. 5 years later, a new church building was built on Shirley Street in 1914. In October 1914, a church school was created, initially meeting in the Oddfellows Lodge. The school had to close from 1919 to 1922 due to finances, but reopened in 1923 in the basement of the Shirley Street Church. It was in this church that H.T. worked as principal and teacher for the 1928-1929 school year. In 2018, I went to Nassau and saw the Shirley Street Church, which is now an auto repair garage. The 1929 yearbook of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination listed H.T. as the church school teacher in the Bahamas Mission, part of the Antillean Union. A doctoral dissertation that was available online, author unknown, was about the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the Bahamas. Chapter 111 was about the history of the Adventist schools in the Bahamas. A list of the principals of the Bahamas Junior Academy was made, showing H.T. as the principal of the academy for the 1928-1929 school year. The January 24, 1929 issue of the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald contained a letter from the president of the Antillean Union, A.E. Ogden. I feel that I should also mention the faithful work of H.T. Saulter of Oakwood Junior College, who has recently come to this field and is teaching a church school of about 30 students in Nassau. Brother Saulter is much more than a teacher. He is a real missionary and a great help in the work of the church, assisting generally in every way possible for its advancement. End quote. While in Nassau, H.T. met Hazel Beatrice Chestnut, born in Current, Harbor Island on October 11, 1911. From this relationship, my mother, Joyce Elva Saulter, was born in 1929. For all of my life, we celebrated our mother's birthday on August 20th. But upon review of records, my mother's birthday was listed as July 20, 1929. The reason for this discrepancy is unclear. Records also show that 4 days before the birth of my mother, H.T. left Nassau on July 16, 1929, arriving in Miami the next day on July 17, 1929. This is the ship manifest of the S.S. Montague. H.T. used his parents' home address as his address on the manifest. H.T. boarded the steamship S.S. Princess Montague, operated by the Florida Inter-Island Steamship Company out of Miami, Florida, which was owned by the advertising entrepreneur Baron Collier. The steamship made regular trips between Miami and Nassau. The SS Montague was severely damaged when it ran aground on Tony Rock during the Great Bahamas Hurricane in 1929. The Great Hurricane was a Category 4 hurricane slowly passing through the Bahamas from September 24th to the 26th, 1929, 2 months after H.T. left Nassau. This hurricane resulted in 142 deaths and unknown costs and damages. The Princess Montague was replaced by the SS City of Nassau on its Miami to Nassau route. I have not been able to tell if the Princess Montague was ever seaworthy again. A possible explanation for the timing of the departure of H.T. from Nassau was that 1 month earlier, on June 9, 1929, his older brother, Charles Jr., accidentally drowned in Fayette County, Lexington, Kentucky. Shown here is the death certificate. After returning stateside, the Michigan Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church sent H.T. to Flint, Michigan, to be the principal teacher of the brand new Flint No. 2 SDA School in 1932, now known as the Fairhaven SDA School. 4 years later, he is seen in this photograph in 1936 with Oakwood's Men's Chorus. In the same year, 1936, H.T. married Leona Franklin in Indiana. The marriage license announcement was published in the July 30, 1936 edition of the newspaper, The Hancock Democrat of Greenfield, Indiana. Leona Franklin was the daughter of William Franklin and Martha Leona Mitchell of Indianapolis, Indiana. According to the 1910 census, William Franklin worked for a street railroad and Martha was a housewife. 4 years after their marriage, H.T. registered for the military. His registration card is shown here, dated October 16, 1940. His home residence was listed in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was employed by the Ohio Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. 3 years later, he was enlisted in the Army on September 24, 1943, as a private. He was 1 month shy of his 37th birthday. His registration card has written on the top that he was discharged on September 21, 1945, 19 days after Japan surrendered to the U.S. in World War II. He was in the Army for 728 days, 2 days shy of 2 years, and he separated from the service at the rank of sergeant. After discharge from the Army, H.T. served at the Allegheny Conference Book and Bible House from 1945 to 1951. The Allegheny Conference of Seventh-day Adventists was formed on September 26, 1945. It was during this time that his Bahamian daughter, Joyce, my mother, left her home to join her father in Pennsylvania to enroll in the newly formed Pine Forge Academy, a boarding academy for African American Seventh-day Adventists. In the book by DeWitt Williams, titled Precious Memories of Missionaries of Color, Volume 2, a whole chapter is devoted to H.T. Saulter. In this chapter, we learned that in 1951, H.T. was ordained to the gospel ministry in Baltimore, Maryland. In 1951, H.T. was called to Kansas City, Missouri. In Delbert Baker's book, Telling the Story, an anthology on the development of the Black SDA work, we are told that a new conference had formed called the Central States Conference, comprised of the black constituencies of Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Wyoming, the San Juan County of New Mexico, Minnesota, North and South Dakota. Frank Bland was the first president of the conference, and H.T. Saulter was named the first secretary-treasurer, a position he held for 11 years from 1951 to 1962. During the 11 years as secretary-treasurer of the Central States Conference, H.T. wrote many articles for the conference newspaper, the Central Union Reaper. In the April 14, 1959 edition of the Central Union Reaper, there was an article about Elder H.T. Saulter conducting a successful week of prayer in Denver, Colorado. Just above that article, there was an interesting article written by H.T. Saulter about Richard Penniman, better known as Little Richard. The article was about Little Richard's visit to a church in Kansas City to give his testimony of his conversion back to Christianity. In 1962, H.T. left the Central States Conference and went back to his alma mater to become the assistant business manager at Oakwood College, serving in that position until 1969. In 1969, H.T. headed west, where he was asked by the Southeastern California Conference to be an interim pastor of various regional churches in the Southeastern California region. He also organized the Encanto Company of San Diego, which eventually became a recognized church in 1978. In 1971, while a pastor of the Encanto Company, H.T. was asked to become the Pacific Union Conference auditor. As reported in the Pacific Union Recorder in the February 22, 1971 edition, H.T. was, quote, well known for his friendly humor and sound business principle, and is therefore well equipped for this new position, end quote. The November 11, 1974 edition of the Pacific Union Recorder reported that H.T. was assigned as interim pastor of the Kansas Avenue Seventh-day Adventist Church in Riverside, California. He remained at this church until his retirement from the ministry, staying on as a faithful member. In 1981, Kansas Avenue Seventh-day Adventist Church completed the third phase of the building complex and named the new multi-purpose hall the H.T. Saulter Hall. This portrait of H.T. used to hang in the stairway leading down to the multi-purpose room. H.T. lived in Riverside, California until his death on April 4, 1995. He was 88 years old. His death certificate states that he had a deep venous thrombosis, pulmonary embolus, and a subdural hematoma. He now rests in peace at the Riverside National Cemetery. Henry Thomas Saulter, my granddaddy, was a teacher, pastor, and administrator who, as described before, was very well known for his friendly humor and sound business principle. I have met many people over the years who have wonderful memories of H.T., from helping Pine Forge students at the Book and Bible House to helping Oakwood College students find sources of tuition funding to shepherding his flock as their pastor. As a child, my memories of H.T. are when he and Nana would visit us from Riverside, California for 2 weeks each summer while we were living in Maryland. I thought he was a great carpenter. During one 2-week summer visit, he finished our partially finished basement. During another summer visit, he made a wooden tool chest for me. I also remember him effortlessly striking up conversations with total strangers while we were out and about. He embodied the saying, he never met a stranger. I remember his humor. He would ball up his left fist and ask me if I preferred 6 weeks in a hospital and then ball up his right fist and say, "Or do you want 6 feet in the ground?" One summer, when they were visiting us, they decided to go to Mount Vernon to tour the George Washington estate. As a little kid, I refused to go with them when asked. When they returned, H.T. told me that he asked George Washington if he had anything to say to his grandson, who didn't want to see him that day. And H.T. told me that George Washington said, "Not a word." That had me confused for a few days, I must admit. He would often say, "Your middle name must be Lee, and your first name must be Ugg, because you are," and you can figure the rest. He was quick to laugh and never made me feel that I was taking up his time. If you are viewing this documentary, there is a good chance that you also have an interesting and often comical experience with HT. Please share those experiences in the comment section. Also, if you have an interesting picture or artifact, please let me know. These documentaries are a work in progress and will be updated as more information becomes available. Where did I come from? And where am I going? That's it for this edition of Where Did I Come From and Where Am I Going? I'll see you next time for the next exciting episode when we will cover a member of Joan's side of the family and present the life and times of Gardner Luke Dixon, Joan's maternal grandfather. We'll see you then.